All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to My Vote Counts, a weekly webinar hosted by the Michigan Department of State to answer all things Michigan elections. Today's topic is Your Vote Counts, Michigan Elections 101. Before we dive into our topic today, I just want to give a quick recap about some of the previous sessions that we have hosted with My Vote Counts. For those of you who are interested in watching some of our replays, you can find that in the emails that are circulated after each session. Thank you so much to those who have previously tuned in to all of our sessions prior to August's primary. We've covered things from absentee voting to voter registration, voting at your polling place, and what happens after polls close. We're doing this series to ensure Michigan voters, residents, and organizations understand how Michigan's elections are securely, fairly, and accurately administered, and to help educate Michigan voters on their options for participating in Michigan's elections. To encourage Michigan residents and groups across their state to empower voters in their communities and to participate in our elections by providing accurate and informative information about elections and voting in our state. So quickly, I'd like to reintroduce our hosts for My Vote Counts. We have Keela Crane, Deputy Legal Director, who will be presenting a bit later. Megan Shar, Associate Legal Director with the Department of State, who could not join us today, but will be at next week's session. Neva Civilis, Director of Public Engagement, is joining us today and will participate in hosting today's event. We also have Katie Doyle, Director of External Engagement, with us today as well. All right, so diving in, michigan.gov/vote. Don't forget, I say it an awful lot. It is your one-stop shop for all things Michigan elections and to find your voter information. By visiting michigan.gov/vote, you can update your voter information, like your address, for example. You can check your registration status and your information. You can ask for and track an absentee ballot. You can view a sample ballot, and you can find your local clerk and polling place information. All right, I will now hand it off to Neva Civilis, the Director of Public Engagement at the Michigan Department of State, to talk to us a little bit about the upcoming statewide general election. Neva?
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. Now that we've wrapped up our state's primary election, it's time to prepare for our state's general election, which will be held on Tuesday, November 8th. So this is what we need to know, and this is what this will mean for you. Okay, so by Monday, October 24th, everyone must register to vote online at michigan.gov/vote or by mail. Exactly what Sarah said before, michigan.gov/vote or by mail. Our recommended date to request an absentee ballot is also Monday, October 24th. And this is recommended to avoid any potential mailing delays. We know this can happen, so don't put it off. Just as soon as you can, take care of that. But remember, October 24th. So for our statewide general election, Tuesday, November 8th, Friday, according to Michigan law, Friday, November 4th, by 5 p.m. is the deadline to request an absentee ballot to be mailed to you. Monday, November 7th, by 4 p.m., you can vote early in person with an absentee ballot at your city clerk's office or township. By 8 p.m. on election day, you can return your signed absentee ballot by hand or drop it off in the drop box. And also, you can register to vote in person at your city or township's clerk's office. And now we'll discuss how elections are administered in Michigan. And for that, I'll turn it over to Keela Crane, Deputy Legal Director.
Neva. So as Neva stated, we are transitioning from our primary election to our general election. One second, I hear a little bit of a feedback. Okay. So we're transitioning from our August primary election to our general election. So in most state races and some local races for the primary election, you can only vote for one party in a primary election, either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, or if you decide to not vote for either one of those, you can just vote for the nonpartisan races that are available. In the general election, that's different. You can vote for anyone from either party that you wish. And also the candidate with the highest number of voters in each race from the August primary is on the ballot as the nominee for their said party. One of the issues that gets confusing on the primary election, like I was saying before, is can you split your vote? You cannot split your vote in the primary election, but you can do so for the November general election. You can decide that you want to vote for somebody from one party for one race and then go to another party for another race. You can also do a decide that you want to check the box and say you want to vote for everybody in a particular party and do it that way as well. And then, of course, as always, for both of our elections, nonpartisan, county and state board of canvassers will certify the election at the conclusion of the election, both in the primary election as well as the general election. And we've talked about this before, but Michigan's elections are decentralized. It's on a grassroots kind of a basis, from our local election officials to our county election officials, and then up to the Michigan Secretary of State's office. In Michigan, we have 1,520 city and township clerks all across our state. Then we have 83 county clerks, one for each county in our state, and they manage the elections for their counties and all the jurisdictions within their counties. They helped provide contracts for elections. They do election vendors and providing information for voters. Then you have the Michigan Bureau of Elections, which is an office within the Michigan Secretary of State's office that provides guidance and standards to all clerks, make sure that they are properly trained and that the elections are carried out uniformly across the state. And in compliance, of course, with all state and federal election laws. The Secretary of State is the chief election officer for the state of Michigan, and she has broad authority around elections. However, she does not directly administer the elections on the local and county level. So once again, this is a different way to look at it. Who administers our elections here in Michigan? Our local clerks. And then on election day, you have precinct chairpersons, and that's a person who is running the precinct at your local polling place. And then you have an election inspector. Those are the folks that are checking you in when you come in person and verifying your address, providing you your ballot and helping you as you are participating in election day at the polling place. Election inspectors are trained, Election inspectors are trained government workers. And so those persons are selected by the local clerks. And we also make sure that there's a balance of both parties for people who are working as election inspectors at your local polling place as well.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
There we go, back on track.
There you go. All right. So election challengers versus election poll watchers. We want to make sure that everyone is clear about what's the difference between these two important roles when you vote in person. So an election challenger is a non-governmental volunteer election observer that is typically appointed by either one of the major parties or a nonprofit organization. They must have a valid credential that is presented to the election inspector, and there should be something on their person that identifies them as an elections challenger while they are in the polling location. That is distinct from a poll watcher. A poll watcher can be anyone from the public. Typically, they are connected with a nonprofit, non-governmental organization, but they are a volunteer election observer that does not have credentials, that stays in a public viewing area. The poll watchers have more limited rights than a challenger. They cannot issue challenges, and they cannot engage with the election inspectors as compared to a election challenger who can engage. I just want to be very clear about this, however, neither poll watchers nor poll challengers can assist voters at a polling location. We want to make sure that election challengers and poll watchers are not necessarily engaging with voters as they are trying to exercise their right to vote. Also, the Department of State nor local clerks hire election challengers, nor do they hire poll watchers. In 2018, in November 2018, we passed Proposal 18-3, which enshrined voting rights in our state constitution. There were 7 of them, and they include the right to a secret ballot, a right for no reason absentee voting, meaning that any registered voter in the state of Michigan has the right to vote via an absentee ballot, and they can do that anytime up through election day. You can also have the right for a same-day voter registration, meaning that any eligible Michigan resident can go to their local clerk's office on election day and register and decide to vote either via an absentee ballot or at their local polling place. And we also have the right here in Michigan for an automatic voter registration. So when eligible Michigan residents interact with our office at the Secretary of State, they will be automatically registered to vote unless they opt out. These are a few of the rights that are now enshrined in our Constitution based upon Proposal 3 from 2018. So who can vote here in our state? To register to vote in the state of Michigan, you must be a United States citizen. You must be a Michigan resident for at least 30 days. You must be at least 17 and a half years old, meaning that you will turn 18 on or before Election Day, November 8th. And you also must not be currently serving a sentence either in jail or in prison. We want to emphasize that last bullet, that people who are incarcerated that have not been convicted and not been sentenced to a term in jail or in prison are still eligible to not only register to vote, but also cast their ballot. And how to register to vote. I think Sarah touched on this earlier today, and you'll hear this throughout our series. So hopefully you'll have it memorized by the time we get to Election Day. There are 3 ways to vote in Michigan, to register to vote in Michigan. You can register online right now as you're watching this webinar at michigan.gov/vote. And as Sarah says, it's always your one-stop shop for all things elections. You can also register by mail using the voter registration application that you can find on the website, or you can find it at one of our branch offices, or many libraries and other community locations. You can also register to vote at your local clerk's office up to and on Election Day. Accessing the vote. We want to make sure that everybody has an unfettered access to casting their ballot. So we want to talk about a few different ways that you can access the vote. Language access. Any Michigan resident who is casting their ballot has the right to bring a person to help them if they are not proficient in English, and they're able to help them go over their ballot and making sure that they are able to cast their choice on their ballot. However, your interpreter cannot influence your vote. They cannot be your employer. They cannot be an agent of your employer or of your labor union. But if anybody else fits that description, if anybody fits a description other than those types of people, they can assist you if you're not proficient in English. There, of course, are some jurisdictions in our state that must translate their ballots in languages other than English, and we will talk about that later in this series. As I stated before, returning citizens have the right to vote if they're incarcerated but not sentenced, and upon exiting prison or jail, they have the right to vote. People who need accessible access to the voting machines when they vote in person have the right to utilize a voter assist terminal. So when you're coming into a polling location, there are all of the various poll booths, and there's also a voter assist terminal that will assist people who may be experiencing difficulties with hearing, with seeing, or even dexterity issues. That allows those persons to be able to cast their ballot and to vote independently and privately. Lastly, there's no photo ID required to vote in the state of Michigan. You may be asked to present a photo ID, of course. If you do not have that on your person, you are able to sign an affidavit of identity and then be allowed to cast a regular ballot. As we stated, all Michigan residents are able to cast an absentee ballot to vote in all elections, and that's based upon Proposal 3. How do you request an absentee ballot? Same ways as you are able to do so registering to vote. You can either go online to michigan.gov/vote. You can register, you can request an absentee ballot by completing an absentee ballot application. Some people have completed a absentee ballot application and checkmark that they wanted to be on the permanent AV list. So we just want to elevate and let you all know that if you're on a permanent AV list, that means that your local clerk will continue to send you out an absentee ballot application, not an actual ballot. Before every election, you must request an absentee ballot through this application process. You can also request an absentee ballot at your local clerk's office. Elections in Michigan and across the country, but we're just talking about Michigan today, are secure, accurate, and fair. Michigan's election processes have built-in checks and balances to ensure our security, the fairness of our elections, and the accuracy of our elections. We have independent, nonpartisan board of canvassers that will certify our elections processes on the county level and the state level. Our clerks and our state official conduct hundreds of risk-limiting post-election audits that go through various checklists to look at all the different types of systems and how we conducted our elections. And Michigan uses some of the nation's best practices for election security, including making improvements on our qualified voter file and also participating in the Electronic Registration Information Center, also called ERIC. Now I want to turn it back over to Neva to talk about how you can empower voters in your community. Neva?
Neva, I think you might still be muted.
My apologies. Everyone can play a key role in engaging their communities as it relates to voting. However, there are just a few do's and don'ts that we would like to recommend so that you can get involved and you can get involved effectively. So let's start with the do's. Do educate voters on their rights and options for participating in an election. Do help registered voters make a plan to vote, which is very important, and we'll talk about that more. Do help other eligible voters register to vote. Do provide registered voters with an absentee ballot application, and do share accurate information about elections. So now a few of the don'ts. Don't provide goods or services in exchange for someone's vote. Don't collect and or return other voters' absentee ballot applications or absentee ballots. Exclusions apply for members of the same household, immediate family members, mail carriers, and deputized election officials. And don't assist with or translate another voter's ballot without their consent. You can't help a voter with their ballot if you are or represent their employer. I'm sorry, you can't help a voter with their ballot if you are or represent their employer or labor union representative. That's very important to know. Okay, so let's talk about more making a plan to vote. How many of us know people who are registered to vote, but they just don't vote? We can look at our primary elections compared to our general elections and see that a lot of people vote in the general election, but not as many vote in the primary election. So creating a plan to vote helps ensure registered voters in your community to take part in the democratic process and ensure that you have a voice and your community has a voice. So first, let's verify your voter information at michigan.gov/vote and update your voter registration online or by mail up to 2 weeks before an election or at your local clerk's office leading up to and on election day. Second, choose where you vote, at home or at your clerk's office with an absentee ballot or on election day at your polling place. This is very important because, again, this is part of the plan to know exactly where you're going to vote in case you run out of time as far as things get caught up in your day and it's hectic. So make sure that you select in the place where you want to vote. And of course, number 3, vote. If voting absentee, request and return your absentee ballot by 8 p.m. on election day. If voting in person, visit your polling place between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. Please note that after 8 p.m., you will not be able to go to your polling location. It closes down immediately at 8 p.m. So not 8:01, not 8:02, 8 p.m.
All right, so one of the questions that we get at the Department of State is questions about hosting voter registration drives. Organizations or even just individuals can host a voter registration drive. And as it says here, anyone can help an eligible citizen register to vote. There's no minimum age, citizenship, residency, or registration requirement. And there's no requirement for prior experience or training. You just need to know a few key things about how to register people to vote and how to follow the law when you're helping others register to vote. And that's really all that's required. So anyone can host their own voter registration drive and assist with getting eligible Michigan residents registered. You can use the Michigan voter registration application, or you can direct Michigan residents online to register to vote at least 2 weeks before an election. So a couple things to keep in mind here, and this I think falls in the don'ts column. When registering others, it is against state law to pay or incentivize someone to register to vote. You cannot compensate someone who's doing the registrations based on the number of voters that they register or the number of voters that they register in a particular party, if they're trying to register on a partisan basis. They cannot compensate. And you cannot complete or fill in any missing or incomplete information on another individual voter's registration forms. So unfortunately, if someone forgets to fill in a critical piece of information, the person doing the voter registration drive cannot fill in that information, even if they know what that missing piece of information is. They cannot add it in. So another question that we get an awful lot at the Department of State is, how can you help to stop the spread of misinformation in your communities? And there are a couple key ways that you can do that. So number one, prepare for and pre-bunk false information. Now, what do we mean by pre-bunk? It's a great question. Pre-bunk is when you expect that you're going to hear some misinformation in your community. And I think at this point, we all kind of know what type of misinformation circulates about elections. The best way to help combat some of that misinformation spread is by providing people with the facts about elections in advance. So that way, when people hear some misinformation, it's pre-bunked, as in they already know. That doesn't sound right. That's not accurate. Or I know that that's not true. You can refer members of your community to a trusted source for verified nonpartisan information, like michigan.gov/SOS Partners in Democracy. We include that link in all of our follow-up emails that we send to folks who sign up. So you can find that link there as well. And there's lots of really great materials and resources in there, including flyers, graphics, and one-pagers that you can share with your community about a wide range of elections topics. Another thing that you can do is, when you're on social media, verify information before sharing it. I think all of us who are on social media are guilty at one time or another of seeing something and thinking it's funny or cute or just interesting and wanting to click that share button. But during election season, and during any time, really, it's really important to take a moment and pause and think to yourself before you click that share button, does this look right? Does this look accurate? It might be something that maybe you know is not accurate, but when you click that share button, does everyone else who will see that know that it's not accurate? So think twice before you click the share button, and you can verify the information you're seeing about elections by visiting michigan.gov/SOS fact check. You can visit that page, and it lists a bunch of resources to help you fact check information that you see online. And the final recommendation that we have here is only share accurate information from trusted sources. Oftentimes during elections or in the lead up to elections, we see people with good intents sharing bad information, meaning that they circulate information about elections that's untrue, sometimes without knowing that it's not true. So if you only share information that you know is accurate from a trusted source, like the Michigan Department of State, you'll know that it's accurate every time. So if you see something on social media that looks off or untrue, don't share it. And finally, if you encounter misinformation about elections, you can report it by emailing us at misinformation@michigan.gov. And now it's time for our Q&A. So as usual, many of you submitted questions to our team prior to today's event when signing up. We'll go through some of those first. And if you have a question that has occurred to you right now or at some point during our presentation, you're welcome to submit it using the Q&A function in Zoom. You can find that feature by clicking the Q&A button that has two little speech bubbles above it, and you'll be able to submit your question that way. I just want to remind our viewers that we do get a lot of really great questions, and we try to get through as many as we can, but often we run short on time and we're not able to get through all of the questions. But we always follow up with information and resources for all of our viewers to help you connect you with the answers that you're looking for. So we can go ahead and start with some of our pre-submitted questions. So first question for you, Keela Crane. Where may we find an itemized list of positions of each candidate when deciding who to vote for? It can be tedious scrolling through different jargon on each web page.
Sure. So on our website, michigan.gov/vote, you can get a sample ballot, but we won't have like biographical information there. So you can go to trusted sources, such as nonprofit organizations, or even party-affiliated websites to get information about the various candidates that are up for office.
Great, thank you, Keela. Next question. How does a person volunteer to assist with these discussions? And I can go ahead and take this one actually. So My Vote Counts is a weekly webinar hosted by the Michigan Department of State, and recordings are available for each session for sharing with members of the public. And that's the best way that you can assist with these discussions, is by sharing that information and our session recordings with your community. So next question. How soon before an election can I change my address and still ensure my ability to vote?
So you can change your address all the way up through and on election day. If you're doing it online, you may want to wait to do that. Or excuse me, if you're doing it online or via mail, you want to do it 2 weeks before election day. But you can do it on or through election day at your clerk's office and then vote either right there at your clerk's office or at your new polling location. You, of course, need to bring your proof of residency when you go to the clerk's office to show that you have moved. But you have a lot of time to be able to update your update your address. And if you know that you're moving or have recently moved, you can do it right now by going online to michigan.gov/vote and update it.
Great. Why do we provide ballots in other languages?
Well, of course, we want to make sure that everyone, regardless of their English proficiency, has the ability to exercise their right to vote. And in compliance with the Voting Rights Act, depending upon the level of or the numbers of persons in a particular jurisdiction who speak languages other than English, it would be against the law not to translate ballots and not just ballots, but election materials in certain languages other than English. So we want to make sure that everyone has the ability to cast their ballot for the person of their choice. In our state, we have 3 jurisdictions, Covert Township and Fenville City, who have to translate their ballots into Spanish. And then we have Hamtramck that is required to translate their ballots into Bengali. Any jurisdiction can translate their ballots into languages other than English if they know that they have a high population of folks that speak a language other than English more proficiently. But those 3 jurisdictions in our state are required to do so by the Voting Rights Act.
Thanks, Keela. I think when you were listing out the ones required for Spanish language, you listed the final 2, and the first one would be Clyde Township, and that's in Allegan County. There's
Yes.
more than one Clyde Township in Michigan, so the one we're
Yes.
the one in Allegan County.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. What is voter intimidation, and what should I do if I see it?
So voter intimidation is either physical or verbal attempts to prevent people from exercising their right to vote. So it could be asking people who are not poll workers for personal information. It could be in the form of taking pictures or videotaping voters while they are approaching a voting location. It could be disseminating false or misleading election information, either on social media or in leaflets in a particular community. It could be as simple as blocking entrance to a polling location or directly questioning voters, harassing voters, that sort of thing. Those are just some examples, but all of them are illegal and they are violative of both state and federal laws. So if you do experience this or you have heard about potential voter intimidation, you can contact not only our office, but there's a National Election Protection Hotline that you can contact 1-866-OUR-VOTE, and they are tracking that information and have folks that are assisting voters with providing information about how they can combat any voter intimidation or attempts to suppress people's ability to cast their ballot.
Great, thanks, Keela. All right, next question. This is a great question. I'll actually take this one. In what way can I use my executive management and communication skills to help assist with the elections process? Great question. And the answer to that is to apply to serve as an election inspector. Election inspectors is what we call poll workers in Michigan. Clerks are always on the lookout for skilled workers proficient in technology and project management and executive management to serve as poll workers or precinct chairpersons. So you can contact your local clerk's office to learn more, or you can visit michigan.gov/democracy-MVP, as in most valuable player. And you can complete an election inspector interest form at that site. And you can also host a voter registration drive in your area. We talked a lot about that earlier in today's presentation. And you can find more information about that on our website as well. Next question. What happens with your information after you register to vote?
So the information, once submitted to your local clerk's office, is vetted by the local clerk's office and then placed into the qualified voter file. And that's the main methodology for the clerk's office to be able to make sure that you have your accurate ballot for when you want to vote, either if you want to vote absentee or in person at your local polling location. Oh, you're voted, Sarah, or muted.
All right, thank you. Knew it would happen at some point. What prevents someone from fraudulently registering to vote?
So there's various checks for us to determine whether or not someone is eligible to vote. So for example, if you're registering to vote online, in Michigan, you have to utilize your driver's license or your state ID in order to access our online voter registration portal. And because you have a state ID or a driver's license, we know that you are a United States citizen, that you are a Michigan resident, that you're all of those different things. And we're able to check that against our systems. So that's one way to understand whether or not somebody is able to register to vote. And we also clear up our voter rolls utilizing our ERIC system, working with our federal partners and other state partners. So there's many different systems that we have at our disposal to ensure that everyone here in our state is eligible to vote and is voting at the right place.
Thanks. Would it be legal to hold an event at which people are invited to turn in their ballots and then have organizers of the event turn in all the sealed ballots at the nearest drop box? And
No.
who is allowed to return absentee ballots?
Yeah, that's a great question. And unfortunately, no, you cannot do that. Persons who can return absentee ballots on behalf of someone else have to be either a member of their immediate family who has been asked to turn in their ballot, a person that's residing at the voter's household who's been asked to turn in a ballot, either a United States postal worker who that's their job, or a person that has been deputized by the local clerk's office to go and retrieve a ballot on behalf of an absentee voter. So no, you cannot hold an event and asking people to come and turn in their ballots. What you may be able to do is to see if your local clerk's office has a satellite office and direct people to a satellite office if they can't get to the main local clerk's office. But no, you cannot hold an event to do that.
Okay. So speaking of misinformation, we talked about ways earlier to help prevent the spread of misinformation. And one piece of misinformation that seems to pop up often around Election Day is the subject of this next question. My polling place provided Sharpies for voting, which concerned me. Are Sharpies okay to vote with? And why is my polling place providing them instead of ballpoint pens?
Yep, you can use a Sharpie. That's okay. Sometimes we run out of pens at polling locations. I remember distinctly in the 2020 election that we were trying to assist some polling locations for getting extra pens. So it sometimes happens, but yes, if your polling location has a Sharpie, don't be alarmed. You can utilize that to mark your ballot.
Right. I actually used a Sharpie when marking my ballot this year. And sometimes Sharpies are the recommended instrument of choice by the tabulator manufacturer because the ink dries very quickly and doesn't leave any residue on the ballot scanner. So Sharpies are perfectly fine. What do voters who already registered need to know?
Well, you need to know a couple of things. One, you need to know where you need to go vote. So you can check all of that at michigan.gov/vote or look on your voter registration card. So you need to know what your precinct is. It may have changed locations since 2022. So 2021 or the last time that you voted. So you just want to verify that. Also, because of redistricting, you may be in a different district, either congressional district, state house or state senate district, or school district. So you want to know, making sure that you're cognizant of that and to see who actually is on your ballot for that particular district. You also want to know, what is your plan to vote? Do you want to vote at your local polling location? Do you want to vote via absentee ballot? And depending upon what choice you're making there, you want to make sure that you're adhering to the deadlines that we went over with you earlier on this session today, whether you're going to request an absentee ballot and when you need to turn that in, or the time for you to be able to go vote if you're going to vote in person.
Great. Does registering to vote enter you into the pool for jury duty or the draft?
So we do utilize people who have registered to vote for jury pools. We do not utilize that for the draft. Well, there is no real draft in the United States anymore, but men between 18 and 25 are still required to sign up for the selected service. And that's a different sign up mechanism than registering to vote.
Can we still pass out food and water to voters waiting in line, for example?
Yes, you can.
Great. Okay, so that wraps up our pre-submitted questions. So now we'll move to some of the questions that I've submitted in our live Q&A in the few minutes we have remaining. So the first question I have for you, Keela, is why can you split your ticket in November, but not in the August primary? And what is the law and reasoning for that?
That's a great question. So remember, in the primary election, you're trying to decide who is going to be that party's nominee to go to the general election in November. So you can't go from one party to another. You have to say that you are voting for one party's nominee for all of these different offices. So you have to select either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, or if you decide not to participate in the partisan elections, then you can just vote on the nonpartisan elections that are available on the primary. Then when we get to the general election, it's all together. So you can decide that you want to split your ticket and decide to vote for one race for one person of their party, and then in another race, you want to vote for somebody else of a different party. You can do that at the general election. But at the August primary, the purpose of that primary is to determine who from that party will be on the ballot in November. I hope that helps clarify why.
Yes, that was very clear. Thank you, Keela. And we just want to issue a quick correction to something that we said earlier in the presentation about boards of canvassers being bipartisan rather than nonpartisan. Someone in the Q&A pointed that out for us. Thank you for that correction. All right, next question. Does a person need a photo ID when registering to vote for the first time?
If you're registering to vote at, say, a voter registration event at a grocery store or whatever, you usually want to bring your voter photo ID to register because they need to put either your driver's license number or your state ID number on that voter registration form. If you don't have that, there are other methods for us to register you to vote. but you may need to bring that when you vote in person on election day, or if you vote in person via absentee ballot, you may have to verify that with additional documentation. So is it required? It's not necessarily required, but it absolutely is the best way for you to register to vote if you're doing it at one of those types of voter registration events. As we stated before, if you're registering to vote online, the only way for you to do that is by entering your state ID or your driver's license number into the online portal. And so we will have that and we're able to check that against our system.
Great. Who can be deputized as an election assistant to help other voters fill out an absentee ballot? If I do not work at the clerk's office, can I volunteer to be deputized?
So we want to tease this out just a little bit. So there's two separate things that you kind of blended together, which is okay. One is assisting people to complete their ballot. Any person can select any person they wish, except for people who are their employer or a member of their union to assist them to complete their ballot. So if I wanted Sarah to help me complete my ballot because I didn't understand some of the language in it, or I was kind of confused, I can ask her to help me complete my ballot. That is distinct from who I can ask to turn in my ballot. Somebody who is assisting someone cannot ask to turn in their ballot. The voter can ask someone to help them turn in their ballot, but that person has to be either an immediate family member. The voter can ask a person that lives in their household to turn it in for them, or to your point, the voter can ask someone who is deputized by the local clerk to turn in the ballot. So you would, the local clerk has discretion on who she or he would like to deputize in order to receive ballots. Typically, to be honest, the local clerk will have somebody from their office go and pick up a ballot for a resident, if that is the case. But that's how I want to make sure that we have those two things distinct. Helping somebody to vote is different from actually turning in their absentee ballot. And that's when you have to be deputized.
Great. Speaking of absentee ballots, when will they be mailed? When will absentee ballots be mailed?
So absentee ballots are required to be mailed 40 days prior to election day. So right now, our local clerks are maybe taking a little bit of a breather from the August primary and getting ready for the November election. They have to put the ballots together, make sure that they are pre-screened, and then they have to submit them to voters by the 40th day before election day. So you can request to get an absentee ballot, I believe 45 days before the election, but they have to submit them out. They have to send them out 40 days before election day.
Right. When I'm canvassing, is it okay for me to help the voter I am engaging with that voter's plan for how to vote?
Yes, you can assist with a person's plan to vote, such as, do you want to vote in person? Do you want to vote absentee? This is how you vote in person. This is how you vote absentee. This is how you get information about people who are running for office, that sort of thing. If that is what you're talking about as far as planning, yes, you can do that.
Great. I've heard that as long as you are still in line at 8 p.m., you will still be allowed to vote no matter how long the line is. So if you arrive after 8 p.m., will you not be allowed to vote?
That is correct. And let me tease that out just a little bit, so make sure. If you are in line, you are absolutely correct with your understanding. If you are in line at 8 p.m. Eastern or Central in our state, you can vote no matter how long that takes. If you get in line after 8 p.m., you are not allowed to vote, no matter if that is at your polling location or if it's at your local clerk's office to vote absentee.
Great. Next question. How can someone have their ballot translated into another language?
So that is up to the local clerk and the county clerk's office to translate ballots. You can absolutely advocate before your excuse me, my goodness, your county clerk's office to translate ballots into languages other than English, especially if you know that there's a good, great large community of speakers that would benefit from a translated ballot. But it's up to the county clerk and the local clerk to decide. So individuals themselves cannot translate ballots into languages other than English to assist voters.
Got it. And this is the final question that we'll take today. This person submitted the question just wanting to clarify something that we said earlier. They said, I thought I heard that the November election is always on the second Tuesday in November. I believe it is the first Tuesday after the first Monday per election law. Can you clarify that for us, Keela?
Yes, sorry about that. Yes, election day is the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. And so this year it happens to be on November 8th because the first Monday is November 7th. Yes.
Right. Well, that's all the time that we have for Q&A today. Again, if you submitted a question and we didn't have time to answer your question, we will follow up with an email after today's event containing a link to a recording of this session and links to resources and information that can provide you any answers to your questions that you may have. Now I will hand things over to Neva to wrap things up for us.
Thanks again, Sarah. And we want to thank everyone for joining us today. And we want to be sure that you sign up for next week's session. And I'd also like to let you know some of our upcoming sessions and what they'll involve. Some of them will involve audits and security, voter list maintenance, absentee voting, voter rights, and how to empower voters in your community. We'll dive into that a little bit more. But again, thank you so much. And if you have any questions between now and then and you want to submit them in advance, please do so via SurveyMonkey. Other than that, thank you again for joining us and have a great, great day.
Thanks so much, everyone.